we're recording this because
We're thinking
sad.
if we were with you, we'd be telling stories that we remember when we were kids of your dad, and maybe even stories of your dad later in life. I didn't live in town anymore, so I don't know those, but I know a bunch of them from even before you kids were born. So hope that we can share some fun thoughts and fun memories of your dad. Well, I'll start with one that I think it's before any of the kids came along, when Art and Gert went on vacation with mom and dad and me. And I don't know if I think Cal might have been born then too. But we were at Elbow Lake, and it's this little lake up near McBain, or not near Irons, up in Manistee, up in that area. And the cottage had an outhouse. And I remember it was like the second day or so we were there, and I had to go to the bathroom so bad. And I ran down to the outhouse, and your mom and dad were in the bathroom, but kind of making noise. Well, they were cleaning it, and because it had cobwebs and everything, and they're cleaning. And I have to go so bad. And finally, they saw me out there. Kathy, what do you need? I said, I have to go to the bathroom. And they said, well, do you have to go number 1 or number 2? And it was a 2-hole outhouse. And I said, well, I usually go on the first one. I didn't know what number 1 and number 2 was. I learned that. Okay, I learned number 1 and number 2 from your mom and dad. So.
Okay, that's funny because the story that I was going to share, I was going to preface it by saying, a friend of mine always says, everything I know, I learned. And the thing that I learned from Art, so, I mean, I was an adult. Rod and I were married, and I don't even remember what it was that we needed notarized. And I think I thought that Annie Ike could do it. So we went to her house and dropped it off. And for some reason, we couldn't stay, and we were like leaving the next day. I don't know if we were going out of the country or whatever. And somehow I said, maybe Art Mulder will do it. And so this document got to Art Mulder, and he called, and he was very stern. And he said, it is not legal for me to sign this without you being present. And I just felt like I was 5 years old again. He did notarize it. But I learned something.
Yes.
Well, I'll share a little story. I don't actually remember doing this myself, but my dad told this story so many times that I must have done it because my dad told the story so many times. But after church on Sunday, sometimes my mom and dad would invite your mom and dad over and the kids, or your mom and dad would invite us over, and we'd just have a little coffee right after the church service before we ate lunch. So I had gone to Sunday school that day, and we came to your house because we were invited there. And I looked up at the there was this thing between your living room and your kitchen, and it had all little shelves, and your dad had some bowling trophies up there. And instead of saying Mr. Mulder, to change the direction of the conversation, I just said, Art, what do you have them idols of Baal up there for? And I guess my father and Art both laughed and laughed so hard they thought that was just hilarious. And you guys used to live right next to our property, and I probably have more memories of Art when you lived right next door, because he was such a kind man. Like if I was playing outside, he would take the time to come over to me and say, hey, Cal, how's it going? And he would really show interest in what I had to say, and he would listen, and he wouldn't just kind of like, oh, you dumb kid, just kind of say hi and walk away. He would always take the time to listen to what I had to say. And I do remember that because that was something I really treasured from him. He was a great guy.
Mhm.
And then when you moved across the street, I didn't have as many personal contacts with him as I did when you lived right next door to us.
Well, I have another story from just a memory, and that was your dad always got a new car every couple years, and you always had such nice cars. To me, I thought you did. And in contrast to we having a 1949 Pontiac, but the year was 1962. And you know, that back then, if your car was even 4 or 5 years old, it really started, you know, looking old. But that 49 with that slanted back, it was just so embarrassing. But I always thought you guys were so cool because you had new cars all the time.
And did you love it when you drove around Byron Center and you'd see an uh, Art Mulder sign in front of somebody's house that was for sale? I
Oh
just
yeah, with
thought,
the yeah.
I know him. He's my neighbor.
Yeah. And it was such a classic shaped sign. It was unusual. And yeah, you'd see that thing and it would just, it'd remind you.
Yeah, I remember playing cards. It seemed like anytime there's an opportunity to play cards, um, dad and our dad and Art and maybe mom and Gert would play. I'm not sure what all they played. I know canasta. It seemed like they played canasta. Was that what they would do? They'd need 4 people for that. And then many memories of, I think Dad and Ray Galhood and Art would go play pool at Galhood's after church while we were all in Sunday school. So that would be a place, if you didn't know where they were, you could find them in the basement over at Galhood's playing pool. You don't remember that, Lois?
So what happens when you're the youngest? Ted, do you
Yeah,
remember any of this?
right. And I think weren't Dad and Art on a bowling team together too?
Yeah, they were.
In a league? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember going and sitting watching them bowl park lanes.
I feel like there was also an art story that had to do with diapers, Kathy.
Oh, well, that's on my list. It's on
Oh,
my list. Right now I just got a text from Mary who can't be part of this. She's at work in Alabama right now, and she's in a meeting with 2 bosses from the Toyota project. And I texted back to her, said, well, do they know who we are? And she said, yes, they will pay for this. but I must have my paperwork submitted by tomorrow morning. It's like, okay, well. Yes, at one time, I was a little bit younger, kind of too young to be totally on my own babysitting at home, but often on a Sunday night especially, I could stay home and babysit the 2 younger girls if Art or Gert was staying home with their kids. So mom and dad would call and say, you gonna be home during church? Yeah, well, we're gonna leave Kathy here with a couple of the kids. And they said to me, if you have any trouble, just, call Art, call Mulder's house. So the one particular Sunday, your dad was home with the kids, and we're sitting in that dinette area watching TV, and one of the kids must have been Lois, was sitting on was it Lois or Mary? Doesn't matter. We'll say it's Mary. She's not here to defend herself. I looked, I could smell something, and I looked, and she had diarrhea, and it went all the way down her legs, down the legs of the bar stool, and then there's a little pool of it on the floor even. And and I decided this is trouble, right? And so they said if I had trouble, just call Mulder's. So I did. Well, then Art said, well, I guess I can come over, but you'll have to come down and sit with my kids while I'm up at your house. He said, deal, it's okay, I can do that. So I went down, and I don't know how much longer, 15, 20 minutes later, he called and said, well, you can come home now. I got it all taken care of. So I came home, and he had a pile of dirty clothes, and he said, you might want to take care of these things. But Mary had clean clothes on and everything. Well, then when mom and dad got home from church, they found out about it, of course, and my mom was so embarrassed. She said, "Kathy, you couldn't clean that up yourself?" I said, "No," and I probably was old enough that I could have, but it was trouble, and they said if they had trouble to call, Mulder, so that's what I did. And I don't know if your dad, I'm sure, remembered it, but it was never anything ever that he teased me about or said anything about after that. So I always felt safe to see him later and not know I wouldn't be teased at all. I babysit a lot for Mulder kids. In fact,
Yeah.
I remember one time we made popcorn, and Mark and the older boy, Mark and Mike, were putting the old maids in their nose, and then they would, blow and shoot them out their nose. And Jana put one in her nose, and she snuffed up, and it went way up. And so you guys stop! I'm yelling, you guys stop! I'm trying to get her to blow out, and she just kept going. And then one of the boys even said, "Oh yeah, she does that." It's like, oh great, now she's got this popcorn kernel up her nose. I had to call mom. Mom had to come down and talk it out of her somehow. Somehow she got it out. But I was worried that your mom and dad would come home and their Jana would have that popcorn kernel in her nose, and they'd never ask me to babysit again. But Mary just sent me a text while she was in this meeting with these bigwigs from Toyota. Said, I don't really have any art memories that stand out. He and Gert were just like an extra set of parents. Now, Gert made the best peanut butter sandwiches, no different than Mom's, but they just always tasted so good. And she taught me that you could put mud packs on bee stings. Yep, lots of memories, and a family that obviously meant a lot to us because we can still remember those incidents like they were, just like we were part of them. Well, we were, but I mean, we can remember them as they were such an important part of our lives. And so far we've addressed most of it related to the kids, but I also have very fond memories, as does Mary, about Gert as well. And we're just so sad for you that you've lost a dear husband. And I know that we'll all be able to see him and rejoice with him one day. So thank you for letting us share.
Yeah, we're praying for you guys.